The U.S. presidential race is still too close to call as ballot counting continues in several battleground states. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. U.S. President Trump tweeted, "Stop the count," on Thursday as officials in key battleground states work to count millions of outstanding ballots. Former Vice President Joe Biden is now within 6 electoral votes of being able to claim victory, according to projections from the Associated Press. We're still waiting for tallies from North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Georgia, and Alaska, and some news organizations have yet to call Arizona. U.S. President Trump has not appeared publicly since early Wednesday morning, but his campaign has filed several lawsuits. He is expected to speak in a short while. For the latest on that, let's turn to CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King. Nathan, I understand the president is going to be making some kind of a speech this evening.
That's right. In about 29 minutes from now, we understand that the president will be speaking. We'd understood that it would be from the Oval Office to begin with, but we now understand it will be in the press briefing room just behind me. So that suggests he will take questions, because we haven't heard or we haven't seen him in 37 hours. That's, what's that, 2,300 minutes? Not that we are counting, but it's quite unusual for this presidency, as you know. So we are waiting to hear from him. Let me just read you like a couple of tweets, well, one of his tweets today, because a lot of them have been flagged by social media, but this kind of sums up where the feeling of the campaign is. All of the recent Biden claim states will be legally challenged by us for voter fraud and state election fraud. Plenty of proof. Just check out the media. We will win America first. I just want to take issue, by the way, with that last bit of the statement. The proof that we have been given is not proof at all. It's some shaky videos. We checked with the authorities. Other media outlets have too. It's not happening. My colleague Sean Caleb's in Georgia, for example, has really checked all this. And, just check out the media. Well, he calls us fake media most of the time. So anyway, you can tell the sort of mood in the White House. And I was speaking to a couple of aides today who kind of describe, the walls closing in a little bit. They realize that their path to victory requires definitely Pennsylvania and 3 of the other states that are outstanding. For Joe Biden, it's 2 states, and they don't necessarily need Pennsylvania. Nevada would put them over the top, according to Associated Press and our count. So you can see where it's going. But there's been raging here against the Republican establishment. They don't feel that Republicans have come out and defended their actions today. And we don't expect some sort of concession speech in 28 minutes or so.
All right, Nathan, let's talk about those lawsuits. They're flying thick and fast. We've seen them all day. What are you hearing about what's the president's legal strategy with these lawsuits, if there is one?
Well, I mean, let's be kind, because let's face it, anyone who is losing a presidential election will try, of course, to make everything as advantageous as possible. But I think it wouldn't be unfair to say they're throwing everything against the wall. Keep counting, they say, in states that they think they may have a chance, Arizona and Nevada. Stop counting in other places. Let's just go down the list. In Nevada, they're accusing, and I'm not joking here, of they see dead people. They're literally saying that Nevada has allowed ballots to be cast from people who have died falsely. There's no evidence of that. Also, the people who have voted from out of state. This has been a meme for years. People driving in from California, etc. It's a nice drive, but would you do that to vote? Would you get away with it? Probably not. Same in Michigan. They tried to stop the count, even though that's moot now, essentially, because it has gone for Joe Biden. That was rejected. In Georgia, they tried to get 58, I'm not joking, just 58 absentee ballots thrown out because they thought they were past the deadline. That was rejected. And we're seeing pretty much that across the board. Now, they can ask for recounts. They're going to get one definitely in Wisconsin. They'll get one in Nevada if they want one. They'll get one in Arizona. I mean, this has happened, but recounts don't change the math. And I can tell you, the election officials are going slowly because they are very meticulous. In Pennsylvania, I think this is where the most important thing is, because the president essentially knows he can't win without 20 electoral college votes from Pennsylvania. And they're essentially complaining about access to polls, which doesn't seem to have happened, although now they're claiming victory, but they're also trying to basically make sure that votes that were cast with a November 3rd stamp on them via mail are not counted after November the 3rd, essentially. So, and Pennsylvania allowed that up until Friday, tomorrow. It's going to be in the courts. I doubt it'll be thrown out. It's already been at the Supreme Court and knocked back twice, I think. We'll see. They haven't won anything yet, but it's a strategy. The problem is that a lot of military ballots, the troops,
right,
are counted last, and that's not a good look, is it? Don't count the troops.
Okay, Nathan, thanks a lot. That's CGTN's Nathan King at the White House. Now, for more on the U.S. presidential race, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Katie Barlow. She's a lawyer and journalist. Also with us is Joseph Williams. He's a senior news editor with U.S. News and World Report. Douglas Sloan is the principal and senior political analyst with National Capital Strategy Group. And from New York, Jadan Horyn is a writer and conservative commentator. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Katie, let me start with you because you wear two hats. You're a journalist and you're also a lawyer. As we just heard, ballots are still being counted in many states. But let's talk about these lawsuits that President Trump has filed in several states, including Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan. He's alleging that Republican observers are being kept away from the area where the votes are being counted. What do you make of these legal steps that the president is taking?
Well, look, right now, I think the president is seeing the writing on the wall. He's seeing that the numbers are not trending his direction in key states like Pennsylvania and Georgia. And I think he's sending his folks into court to try and pause the vote count where it's not going his way. For example, in Michigan, he's trying to pause the vote count. But that suit was thrown out today because the judge, when looking at the evidence, said, I'm not sure it's going to matter much since Biden is already ahead by 150,000 votes. So the key that's happening, the two flaws in these suits that we're seeing in those four key battleground states are that there's not much evidence of what is being alleged as the wrongdoing here. For example, as your reporter noted in Georgia, the Savannah, Georgia ballots, the 58 ballots that allegedly came in after 7 p.m. when they got in court today, there was actually no evidence showing that those ballots came in after 7 p.m. And the other issue is these lawsuits are, in many cases, about a number of ballots that won't make a difference. Just like in Michigan, Biden's ahead by 150,000. So the ballots they're alleging problems with are not going to make a significant difference for them in those battleground states.
Jadan Horyn, some of these lawsuits, they're very puzzling. I mean, even if the president does prevail, even if he does win, they don't actually change anything for him. I mean, we did have one instance where legal action did result in a court deciding the outcome of an election. That was, of course, in the year 2000, when 5 justices in the U.S. Supreme Court stopped a vote recount in the state of Florida, effectively handing or appointing George Bush president. But is there any reason to believe that anything will change for President Trump right now with these lawsuits?
Well, I think first and foremost, the most important thing we need to understand is that in any election, the outcome is determined by verified votes. So whether the candidate is a Republican or Democrat, whoever is trailing, they have the legal right to look for redress in the courts. And it is, frankly, it is a legal distinction whether or not they go to a place where it will make a difference. But it doesn't actually make a difference in terms of the legal argument about needing to verify ballots, and especially for down ballot races or for other various things that may have been on a ballot for a voter. For example, in California, ballots can be 37 pages long. The president may very well challenge there. I'm not saying he would, not because it would change the outcome, but it would, again, examine instances where we need to make sure that election officials and, remind viewers there is no uniform standard for election officials across the country for how they count votes or what they look at.
Right.
So it is highly crucial that we give candidates, whether they're winning or losing, the opportunity to redress. We can sit here and say that they shouldn't do it,
right?
But that doesn't mean that they don't have the right, and that doesn't
Jaden,
mean
I'm
that as
wondering,
we look at it, we should allow the process to play out, including the process of examining ballots.
Right, but what is the point of it then?
Well, the point is, of course, that the candidate is looking for instances, statistically speaking, of anomalies. And if there is, then you have a recanvass.
Yeah.
And a recanvass is different than a recount. A recanvass is where you physically examine the ballots. We saw this in New York. We brought this up multiple times on this program, where there was a 20% error rate or rate of discarded ballots that were mailed in. And they had to recanvass. All of the candidates, all Democratic candidates in that Democratic primary, sued the state for access to view the ballots, which is different than counting. Right?
Okay.
To view, to verify. And so that's, that is what the strategy of the administration is. And I think we have to be very specific about that. And then, if it looks that there is a statistical anomaly, then guess what? The count is the count. If it falls within a recount margin, then you recount and we move on.
Okay. Douglas Sloan, Vice President Joe Biden is now just about 6 electoral votes away from claiming the presidency. He did talk earlier in Delaware. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
We continue to feel, Senator and I, we continue to feel very good about where things stand. We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working. The count is being completed, and we'll know very soon.
So, Douglas, what would you be looking for now? At what point are we going to be able to say, look, this is the definitive result, this is it, it's over, let's move on?
Well, ideally, you would look for those final votes to come in from Nevada, those 6 electoral votes. They're waiting to count, I think it is the mail-in ballots that are coming from, I think it is Clark County outside of Las Vegas. In Nevada, which essentially would put Joe Biden at 270 if you include Arizona's 11 electoral votes that the AP has given him. And quite frankly, anyone that is looking at Arizona and the votes coming in, those final electoral votes being counted, realizes that it's in all likelihood going for Joe Biden as well. But Pennsylvania, the head of the Electoral Commission in Pennsylvania today said that she expected that this could be a done deal in Pennsylvania by this evening. So in all likelihood, we will know the outcome of this election by tomorrow. And I fully expect Joe Biden victory here. We're looking at Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania. That puts him at 290. And my sources are telling me that Georgia is going to come in for him also, which would put him at 306. So we're looking at a resounding Biden victory, hopefully by this time tomorrow.
Right, just to clarify something, Douglas, would Joe Biden be able to claim victory even though there are outstanding legal cases?
Well, you would need to talk to the attorneys to get further clarification on that. But I'm your election guy here. I'm your vote guy here. And I mean, this is a matter of counting the votes and having the states verify them. We have been all the votes have not been counted in many of the states that have already gone for Joe Biden. Right. But we know, based upon the number of votes that come in, that Donald Trump is not going to be able to close that margin, and we have declared Joe Biden the winner in those states. Okay,
Katie, we need your expertise here. Pending the outcome of these legal lawsuits, can the former vice president claim victory?
Depends on what the lawsuit is and where it is and how many votes are at issue. So, for example, in Michigan, where Biden is ahead by 150,000 votes, if President Trump was alleging something wrong with the ballot counting there, it would need to be facts and evidence written into a lawsuit, into a complaint that would comprise or supersede 150,000 votes. That's unlikely. And we can look back at Bush v. Gore and what happened there. That was a very close race. I think it ended up being 537 votes that made up the difference in 2000. And at that time, Al Gore was not going to push it. He was not going to say one way or the other that one candidate had won. He let the courts deal with the lawsuits and move ahead. And that's because it was so close at that point. And I think we may see something similar in Georgia, depending on how huge the margin is. So if the Trump campaign files a suit in Georgia with real facts and real evidence of a problem of the vote counting, we could see something similar. But I haven't seen any indication, any evidence, any even rumblings of something like that in Georgia so far.
All right, Joseph Williams, it looks like Joe Biden is firmly on track to become the next president, but it will be a narrow victory. Before this election, if we looked at what the media was telling us, if we looked at what the polls were telling us, they were talking about a landslide victory, a big margin between him and President Trump. There was talk of a blue wave. Any thoughts on how everybody got this so wrong?
Well, it's chapter 2 with what's the matter with polling and pollsters. I mean, certainly, if you judge by polling, yes, it did definitely sound like there was going to be a blue wave. But even up until Election Day, I was hearing sources telling me that beware of a blue mirage, right? That it may look like the Democratic candidate Joe Biden had gotten out to an early lead because of all the early voting, but that President Trump's supporters show up when they show up, and they show up when they're needed, and they pretty much performed to pattern. They showed up on Election Day, they showed up in great numbers, and that's not to dispute the fact that Biden did very, very well. I mean, if you look at it, he is probably on track to gain the most votes, the most popular votes out of any presidential candidate in modern history, and that's no mean feat. But the difficulty we have here is the fact that you had a lot of Democrats running in, a lot of Democrats and Republicans running in tightly gerrymandered districts in the House. You had a lot of state losses you had a lot of Democrat losses at the state level, and you had a lot of dealings with the Electoral College where that kind of softens the blow for Republicans a little bit, where states get one that don't have a lot of populations, and it adds to the Electoral College total. So I think writ large, Democrats are the only people who can win a presidency and decry that it was a horrible thing, while Republicans are more concentrated on the fact that they won and are taking office.
Jadan Horyn, regardless of whether President Trump prevails in these lawsuits, is the intention here to cast as much doubt on the integrity and legitimacy of the election?
Well, I mean, I would say this. You know, as your previous guest said, there certainly wasn't a blue wave, and I would call it the red undertow. But I would then say, you know, the Republican Party can then take, you know, something from the playbook from the Democrats in 2016, with rather than accepting the results of the election, they accused the American people who decided on President Trump that they were victims of Russian interference and actually did not choose who in fact they chose. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some Republicans, I would never advocate for this, seek to undermine the Biden presidency by calling him an illegitimate president. That's certainly going to be a narrative. And I think, but more importantly though, certainly Biden has to govern as a centrist because of the red undertow, because of the House majority, which was decreased, not increased, because of the flip of governorships, because of the loss of state houses for Democrats, and likely the retention of the Senate. The fact of the matter is the American people chose in 2016 to elect Donald Trump, and it wasn't Russia that did it. It was the American people. And in 2020, the American people nearly chose to reelect Donald Trump. So, you know, I think, unfortunately, in politics, turnabout is fair play, but it's not going to be good for the country.
Right.
And ultimately, we have to move beyond that and go to a consensus-based, form of governing, because there's no way that Joe Biden will be able to get anything done in the next 4 years if that isn't what happens.
Yeah, Douglas, Jadan raises a good point there. If President Trump is trying to muddy the waters here, try to cast some doubt on the integrity of this election, isn't that what the Democrats did to him when he became president? No sooner had he stepped into that White Office, they were screaming, well, Russia put you here. More specifically, Putin put you here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you bring that up because not only the FBI, but all of our national security apparatus did come to the conclusion that Russia did interfere in the 2016 election. So it's interesting that we're sitting here debating this in 2020.
Yeah, but the accusation, Douglas, was that the Donald Trump campaign colluded with Russia.
Yes, that he colluded with Russia. But the end result is that the Russians did interfere. There was a tsunami of different things that came together to, I'm not going to say rob Hillary Clinton of that election, but that helped Donald Trump to win, including Jim Comey coming in at the last minute with another letter to investigate Hillary's emails, which turned out to be a nothing burger. Yeah. So I don't expect that the Republicans would sit up here and try to say that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. I can't imagine. I don't see on what basis they would make that accusation. I expect that Joe Biden will be a president for all of the country, that he will seek to unite America going forward, that he won't seek to divide us, that he won't try to alienate certain people, that he won't seek to do some of the things that Trump did that was very divisive and have all this incendiary rhetoric, but actually seek to unite the country and bring us together as one United States of America. And I think that is going to be the most important takeaway, the most important thing that we have going forward, George, with Joe Biden, is that we will have a great uniter, not a divider in the White House.
Joseph, sorry, did someone want to say something?
Well, I just want to make one really quick point and clear something up factually, that when they talk about Russian interference in the election, they're not talking about Russia coming in and changing votes. They're not talking about Russia manipulating state tallies. They're not talking about that. They're talking about a disinformation campaign where they were using bots, accounts to try to influence people and try to get them to think that something was true that really wasn't. And also the notion of collusion, that was never one of the things that the Democrats openly claimed. They were claiming that there was interference, and they also claimed that the president had strong ties to Russia, and that was questionable. Right. And so I think we need to be very clear and very factual about that.
Yeah, that is an important distinction. Joseph, I'm going to ask you about something else, and that is, we hear all kinds of analyses in the past 48 hours about this election. I heard two very prominent political commentators here in the United States, both supporters of Biden. They both said the same thing. They said Biden's win was a political victory, but it was not a moral victory. They wanted a more vigorous repudiation of Trump and Trumpism, and that would have represented some kind of a moral victory for them. I mean, doesn't that smack of elitism on the part of Democrats? The belief that, only they have high morals. Everything and everyone else is immoral.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that in this election, judging who the incumbent is, I think that it's very clear that you have an incumbent who, if not has questionable, had a questionable run for the presidency with a number of scandals, many of them kind of unseemly. I mean, certainly he had a strong base of support, but we also are talking about an incumbent who has there's been documentation about the prevarications, there's been documentation about the self-dealing, there's been documentation about all of these things that run counter to the norms of the presidency.
Yeah, but so I think these commentators were actually referring to people who voted for Trump. I mean, when you say it wasn't...
And then in that case, yes, there is a kind of a smacking of elitism there. But I think that you also have to understand that a lot of what President Trump has promised has not come true, and a lot of people voted on an economy. I think that the statistic was something like 40% of people went to the polls thinking that the economy was the most important issue and thinking that the economy was in good shape, and that simply is not the case. And those people were responding to a lot of things that the president has said, because if a president says it, people tend to believe that it's true.
Katie, on this point, I mean, looking at the broad overall result, the close margins, the fact that Trump got more votes this time than he did in 2016, he got more votes from people of color than he did in 2016 as well. Does that tell us that Trump and Trumpism is not going anywhere soon?
Absolutely. I think there are, if you look at actually several counties in Wisconsin are a good example of this. They went for Obama in 2008 and 2012. They went for Trump in 2016, which a lot of people attributed to an anti-Hillary sentiment, anti-Clinton sentiment. And this go around, not only did they not move closer to Biden, they went deeper and further into Trump territory, bigger numbers for Trump, and that happened across the country. So I think that we're seeing examples in this election in states, not just in the Deep South, all over the country, where folks are happy with Trump's performance, are happy with what Trump represents, and that are going full bore for those ideals and for Trumpism.
Jadan, I want to talk a little bit about, in the few minutes we have left, about the makeup of the Senate. If the Republicans keep the Senate, it looks like they are on track to keep the Senate, what does that mean for Joe Biden? I mean, there was an article in Axios, the political website, which said that, Mitch McConnell, who runs the Republican Party in the United States Senate, he's only going to accept pretty much centrist cabinet members. Joe Biden is not going to be able to basically choose the people that he wants to. Mitch McConnell's going to have a say in this.
Well, I mean, certainly the Senate does have a say. The president was fortunate, obviously, to have a Senate that was controlled by the same party, but we saw with Barack Obama, at first he had a Senate that was controlled by Democrats, and then it was controlled by Republicans. And there has to be a consensus-based governance. And this is something that I was referring to earlier, that, what was repudiated in this election was the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. It was not Trumpism. It was not America First or, moving away from multilateralism.
Wait, Jadan, why do you say it was repudiated? Because, if we look at the 4 members in the House of Representatives who have come to represent the progressive wing in the House of Representatives for the Democrats, they all were re-elected.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be no different than a very far-right candidate being re-elected in a deep red district. Progressive candidates can be elected in deep blue districts, absolutely. But in the 6 races that were in suburban-style districts, more purple, we should say, every single progressive candidate lost.
Right.
As of now, Republicans are on pace to pick up 10 House seats. That is unprecedented in a year when they were supposed to lose up to 15. And most of those, a large bulk of those, are progressive candidates who underperformed. And again, what we're seeing is that part of the party was repudiated. And I think that's also why we saw Joe Biden win the Democratic nomination. I mean, let's be clear. Joe Biden is not a progressive candidate. He says he's not a progressive candidate. He will not be a progressive president. Yeah. But I say that to say that his style of governance is going to have to be a consensus-based, because in order to pass any legislation, in order to get who he wants in his cabinet, he will have to work with Republicans. Okay.
Douglas Sloan, I mean, looking at this, is this a recipe for more gridlock in Washington?
Quite possibly, but I just want to address a comment made a little earlier. I mean, it sounds like Trump is winning this election. And the last I checked, he's losing. Right. And he may lose by the same margin that he beat Hillary Clinton. It may be 306 to 232. And not only that, we're looking at states that shouldn't be in contention, like Georgia and North Carolina. Guys, we have to just look at the numbers here. Biden is winning this election. It looks like he's going to win Pennsylvania. He swept the labor breadbasket states of Michigan and Wisconsin that Trump won last time, and now he's contesting in Georgia. This is in no way a repudiation of the Democratic Party or a strong vote for Trumpism. Trump is losing, and we're making up ground in the Senate. So I think we have to bring all that into consideration. And yes, of course, if Mitch McConnell is still the president of the Senate, we will have gridlock. There is no question.
We are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And that's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Arlen Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.